Why would this biologist be confronted constantly with issues of design if design is an intuitive, subjective process? But again, the objective nature of the design is apparent and ruled out clearly only by the presupposition of the naturalist paradigm. This can be best illustrated in the rhetoric jargon that many try to argue when they argue the difference and separation of religious ideas and science. Take a look here at what was written in the American Journal of Physical Anthropology. They wrote to their constituents, "In any confrontation, you should be prepared to show that evolution is scientific, not that it is correct. One need not discuss fossils, intermediate forms, or probabilities of mutation. These are incidental. The question is, what is science and what is religion? Therefore, if you must confront the creationist, we suggest you discuss the nature of science, the kind of knowledge it can provide, and the kind it cannot provide." Notice here clearly they're arguing from the metaphysical presupposed paradigm of naturalism. They presuppose that only questions arguing from nature and evolution are true. Therefore, if it is an argument of design, regardless of the evidence, regardless of the theory, if it's outside the realm of the presupposition, they don't consider it science and remove it from the argumentation. Rhetoric, jargon, but not evidence. Now this has been argued and has taken hold only because until recently no one has been able to argue a definition or defined an empirical objective process to recognize actual design. This changed recently only in the last decade when William Dembski wrote his work, The Design Inference. Bill Dembski provides us with a filter which is capable of recognizing the characteristics of designed objects. The filter, called the explanatory filter, examines an object in light of the possible explanations to account for its existence. These explanations are law, chance, law-constrained chance, and design. We'll examine these individually. The first mode of explanation is law, and the example Bill Dembski gives of this is gravity. Whenever two objects of mass approach one another, gravity naturally occurs as a predictable event. Therefore, if something is explained by gravity, then design, although possibly present, is not a necessary inference. The second part, or second mode of explanation, is that of pure random chance. And for an example here, he gives radioactive decay, or the rate of radioactive decay. It's not a law-governed predictive rate, but it's purely random chance. If something can be explained by pure chance, then again, design, although possibly present, is not a necessary inference. But if it's not explained purely by chance, then what we have is a high degree of complexity. We understand degrees of complexity as directly relational to degrees of improbability. Thus, something as complex or improbable as a long sequence of coin flips can still be generated randomly. However, we eventually reach a point of improbability where our imaginations must be constrained and explanations beyond just that of chance are required. But then Bill Dembski's explanatory filter doesn't then point yet to design, but then asks what else can constrain this chance to cause it to go beyond and have sufficient complexity. And since the theories of Darwin, a new mode of explanation has entered, and that of law-constrained chance as an explanatory phenomenon. An example which is given of this is that of an agitator. For example, a pure chance agitator would be, let's say, a barrel with different sized stones which is shaken in space. Without the constraining law of gravity, the large and small stones would equally be bouncing inside the barrel. But under the constraint of gravity, if we were to bring that barrel low and shake it, the rocks would stratify by size and weight. In this type of explanation, what we have is a type of complexity which is explainable by random chance, the agitator, governed by some type of law, or constrained by some type of law, which is gravity. Constrained chance is also the explanatory theory used by exponents of Darwinism, where mutations are considered events of pure random chance, which are then constrained or selectively guided through the law of natural selection. These exponents claim that such constrained chance can then give us the appearance of design and purpose when it does not actually exist. Now, if we have sufficient complexity that is not explainable by either constrained chance or by chance, then we have design. And the key to recognizing the distinction between constrained chance and actual design is what is called specified complexity. In order to explain how specified complexity helps us to recognize design objects, such as a violin, take a look at this example of license plates from a 1997 Corvette. Our first license plate reads BXC 382. As we examine the complexity of this license plate, we find a moderate to fairly high improbability or complexity, about 1 chance in 13 million of arriving at this plate. But there's no specification. This license plate is the result of a primarily random process. But the fact that this car was given this plate at this time is purely random chance. So we have pure chance involved here. Now let's look at the second plate, GRY 815. Now this license plate has the exact same complexity as the one previous, but we begin to see something right away, a type of specification. Now this is still, we would be argued at this point, non-specified complexity. But because the letters GRY represent gray, and they point to a target, a color, something which is known, the color gray, which is on the car, we begin to argue some type of specification. Not sufficient to argue design, but just to give you an example of what specified complexity is. Now, at this point, we would still argue this is pure chance. But if we increase the specificity, we increase the design. For example, if we were to say that this person who owns the car bought this car on his birthday, and his birth date is August 15th, thereby 815. Now we have a greater specificity. Not enough to demand design, but enough to warrant and see the difference. Or if we were to say this is this person's 815th Corvette, then we could argue again greater specificity. But again, the complexity is the same. The specificity is changing. Let's look at the third plate. This one reads GRY VET, Gray Vet. Now we begin to have not only greater complexity, in this case 191 million to 1, but we have begun to introduce high specificity. And finally, the fourth license plate we'll look at, 97 Vet. Here we have extremely high specificity and even greater yet complexity. In this case, with 2 numbers and 5 letters, we are over 796 million to 1. But what makes the great difference is not just the high complexity, but the extreme specificity which accompanies it. Now, the explanatory filter in design theory argues that specified complexity is a reliable empirical marker of actual design. There are 4 reasons why specified complexity has been demonstrated to be a reliable empirical marker of actual design. First, in every case where the filter yields design and we know the causal story, and intelligence was active. We'll note here that what this filter has proven to us is that information comes from intelligence. Some try to argue at this point that design is a God of the gaps argument. We're arguing things we don't understand, therefore we put design and supernatural events in. But we're actually arguing not from what we don't understand, but what we actually do know. And what we do know is that information always, without exception, comes from intelligence. That's what intelligence does. It creates information. The second reason why we know this is a reliable marker is that the filter pinpoints exactly what it is about intelligences that makes them detectable. Third, the filter recognizes specified complexity. And fourth, can specified complexity be generated without design? And the answer, there are no confirmed counterexamples. Here is where the theory is clearly falsifiable, where there's a scientific program, any evolutionist, naturalist that wants to argue against it, is only to produce counterexamples where specified complexity is generated without intelligent design. Now some have tried to argue granite crystals or mixed polymers, But this is simply complexity and order, but not